Welcome to Art Crammer, your fast-track guide to smashing A-level history of art.
Yeah.
Seriously, whether you're battling revision or staring down an exam, I am here to break it all down for you. Clearly, quickly, and with absolutely zero waffle.
That's the plan.
So buckle up, art adventurers, because today we are diving deep.
Absolutely. And get this. Our mission today, which you totally signed up for just by listening, is to unlock the secrets of Frederic Lord Leighton's breathtaking 1890 painting, The Bath of Psyche.
Ah, a classic.
It really is. Think of it as your ultimate shortcut to understanding Victorian academic painting and, well, an incredibly insightful peek into the 19th century art world.
Exactly. And to help us navigate this total masterpiece, we've got some seriously juicy bits. From one introduction to academic tradition.doterix.pdf. Consider this our super detailed map to understanding not just the stunning picture, but, the entire artistic universe it came from.
Our goal today is super sharp. To really get under the skin of why this particular painting is practically the poster child for academic art. We're talking about both what it shows us and exactly how it was painted.
Okay.
By the time we're done with our little art expedition, you'll have this rock-solid foundation for grasping all those mind-blowing, rule-breaking artistic movements that came zooming onto the scene later.
Right. The context is so important.
Definitely. Okay, let's unpack this. What on earth is this academic tradition we keep hearing about?
Right. So picture this. For centuries, art wasn't just some anything-goes situation. There were rules, like a seriously strict rule book, hierarchies, and official gatekeepers deciding what was good and what wasn't.
Gatekeepers is a good word.
That's where this academic tradition comes charging in. Think of it as the established norms and values fiercely promoted by the fine art academies, the art world's VIP clubs, basically.
And the absolute king of these clubs was the French Académie de Peinture et de Sculpture, founded way, way back in 1648. Talk about setting the standard.
Wow, 1648.
Yeah. Then zoom forward through the French Revolution, and it cleverly morphed into the Académie des Beaux-Arts in 1816, with its own sections for painting, sculpture, even music and architecture, very organized.
Okay.
Crucially, they also had the Paris Salon.
Ah, the Paris Salon. Think of it like the ultimate art catwalk, the Met Gala of its time.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
It started way back in 1667 and was the place, capital T, capital H, capital E, for artists to show their work annually or every other year, right up until 1881 when the government took a step back.
Right, things started changing then.
After that, artists started being their own bosses with independent salons.
And across the English Channel, the British had their own powerhouse. The Royal Academy Schools, founded in 1768.
The RA, yeah.
Now, while British art had its own strengths, especially in capturing those gorgeous landscapes, the Royal Academy definitely looked to those established French traditions for inspiration. They also had their own massive show, the Royal Academy Summer Exhibition, which is still a huge deal today.
And let me tell you, back in the mid-19th century, especially during Sir Charles Eastlake's time as president from 1850 to 1865, getting your work blazing into the RA Summer Exhibition was colossal.
Oh, absolutely critical.
It was the golden ticket, the VIP pass to critical acclaim, and even more importantly for some artists, serious financial success. They even moved to the swanky new location in Piccadilly in 1868, which just shows you how incredibly important they were seen to be.
It really cemented their status. What's truly fascinating here is the strict pecking order, the hierarchy of genres within this academic tradition. History painting absolutely reigns supreme.
Right, the big stuff.
Exactly. We're talking about those massive, dramatic, mythological, literary, and religious scenes, the ones that were seen as super intellectually stimulating and, morally uplifting.
Okay.
Still life and landscape. Well, they were considered a little less significant in the grand scheme of things. It was believed that history paintings had the power to teach profound lessons.
So what did these top-dog academic paintings actually look like? What were the must-have features?
Several absolutely key ingredients. First off, flawless technique was non-negotiable. Every single brushstroke had to be meticulously, deliberately placed.
Perfect technique. Got it.
Second, the subject matter had to be elevated, often needing a solid classical education just to even understand what story was being told.
Ah, so not always easy to decode.
Not at all. Then you had the super finished appearance, incredibly smooth surfaces, like you could run your hand over them and feel nothing. Absolutely no visible brushstrokes, very polished indeed.
Like marble, almost.
Precisely. And the human figures were often idealized, practically echoing those perfect proportions you saw in ancient neoclassical art. Oh, and quite often, these paintings were on a seriously grand scale, demanding your attention the moment you walked into the room.
Okay, so it sounds a bit like a very sophisticated, historically themed, epic movie production on canvas. Now, the text mentions some huge names who were influencing French academic painting, right? Ingres and Delacroix. They sound like the rock stars of the art world then.
Absolutely. Jean-Auguste Dominique Ingres, a total neoclassical master, was all about those super sharp, clear outlines, the power of the line.
Line was everything for him.
It really was. Eugène Delacroix, the ultimate romantic firebrand, was famous for his intensely vibrant, rich colors, emotion poured onto the canvas.
Total contrast.
Right. The French academics aimed to grab the best of both worlds, those naturalistic colors that felt real, but contained within those sharply defined forms. They wanted the drama of color with the precision of line.
So clear lines meet luscious color. Got it. What about over in Britain? Who was the main authority figure there setting the artistic agenda?
That would be Sir Joshua Reynolds, the very first president of the Royal Academy. He was a massive fan of the old masters, especially those high Renaissance giants like Raphael and Michelangelo. Talk about artistic heroes.
The big names?
Definitely. In his famous discourses, which were basically a series of super influential lectures, he urged artists to go beyond just copying reality. He told them to correct nature to create these more idealized and harmonious compositions.
Correct nature. Interesting phrase.
It is, isn't it? He really pushed artists to aim for the compositional brilliance of Raphael and Michelangelo. He even painted portraits where he'd cleverly dress his contemporary subjects in classical robes to give them this grand, timeless vibe. Imagine having your portrait done looking like a Greek god.
Huh. Talk about making a statement that lasts.
Now, let's zoom right in on our star today, Lord Leighton. What was his typical step-by-step approach to creating these academic masterpieces? It sounds like a seriously intense process.
It was indeed a remarkably rigorous and deliberate methodology. First, he'd meticulously design the entire composition in his mind's eye, like a director visualizing a whole film.
Wow.
Then came a multitude of sketches, followed by detailed studies of nude models, even if the final figures were going to be completely draped in fabric.
Really? Even if they'd be clothed?
Absolutely, to understand the form underneath. Next up were incredibly detailed black and white chalk drawings to absolutely nail that perfect composition. He'd then create a full monochrome painting, almost like a practice run in tone, followed by even more nude studies to refine the forms and understand the body underneath the clothing.
More nudes.
Yep. He'd repeat the monochrome painting, this time carefully adding in all the intricate drapery. And finally, after all that preparation, he'd apply thin, delicate layers of color.
Phew.
A seriously systematic and incredibly deliberate way of working. No quick sketches here.
Right, so enter Frederic Leighton, born in 1830, who sadly passed away in 1896. He's described as this leading Victorian academic artist, totally famous for those huge, dramatic, mythological scenes and that incredibly precise, almost photographic, polished style.
That polished style is key.
Apparently, he came from a super wealthy family, got the absolute best art education that Europe had to offer, and traveled all over the place, soaking up artistic influences. And you mentioned Flaming June. I think even I've seen that one. That Vibrant Orange is unforgettable.
It's absolutely one of his most instantly recognizable and beloved works. But Leighton was so much more than just a painter. He was a major power player in the art establishment.
Right, the president of the RA.
Exactly. He became president of the Royal Academy in 1878 and collected a whole string of prestigious awards, including the French Prix de Rome and the Légion d'honneur, which was a huge deal for British artists.
Yeah, the Légion d'honneur.
I know. He was even knighted in 1878, becoming Lord Leighton. His home and studio in Holland Park, Leighton House, was a real buzzing hub for the artistic and literary VIPs of the time, and it's now a museum that's absolutely worth a visit.
Leighton House, okay.
G.D. Leslie, in his book The Inner Life of the Royal Academy, described him as this unbelievably refined and courteous figure, almost superhuman in his level of perfection and grace.
Wow, sounds like quite the artistic celebrity. So, the Bath of Psyche, painted in 1890, slots right into that mythological painting category, putting it squarely within that top-tier history painting genre we were talking about. And it also features a nude figure. Now, the text gently reminds us about the difference between naked and nude. Can you give us a super quick refresher on that?
Absolutely. Think of naked as simply being without clothes, a straightforward, factual state of undress.
Just unclothed.
Exactly. Nude, on the other hand, is a deliberate artistic representation of the unclothed human form, often idealized, carefully posed, and intended to evoke a sense of beauty, aesthetic appreciation, or even symbolic meaning. It's about artful representation, not just the absence of clothing.
Got it. That makes perfect sense. So what exactly is the story unfolding in the Bath of Psyche? The text mentions descriptions from the amazing tape written and the super informative Smart history. What do they tell us we're seeing?
Right. Both wonderfully describe Psyche in this really pivotal moment. She's preparing to bathe, a ritual before her highly anticipated meeting with her secret lover, Cupid.
Ah, Cupid.
It's this quiet, intense moment of anticipation, maybe a little vulnerability, before this significant encounter.
Okay, so now for the really juicy bit. How does the Bath of Psyche practically shout academic? Let's really dissect it. The text points out that Psyche's skin has this polished to marmoreal perfection. What exactly does marmoreal mean, and why is that term so relevant when we're talking about this type of art?
Marmoreal literally means like marble. So when we talk about marmoreal perfection in academic art, we're referring to that incredibly smooth, flawlessly polished, and idealized surface, often with a pale, almost glowing, translucent quality, very much like a perfectly carved, gleaming marble sculpture.
Like classical sculpture.
Precisely. Leighton's trip to Italy, where he would have been surrounded by breathtaking classical sculptures, would have absolutely reinforced this aesthetic ideal in his mind. He saw the beauty and timelessness of marble and aimed to capture that same sense of perfection in his painting.
Apparently, there was a specific French artist who really inspired Leighton in creating this particular work, although the text keeps that name a mystery for now.
Yes, it teases us a bit there.
But it definitely sounds like that broader French academic influence we were discussing earlier was a really key factor here. Now, the text also mentions that Leighton deliberately sacrificed color in favor of what artistic elements?
Formal features, specifically the power of line and the precision of drawing.
Ah, back to line again, like Ingres.
Exactly. This deep emphasis on strong draftsmanship, on the meticulous and accurate rendering of form, was an absolutely core tenet, a fundamental principle of academic painting. Color, while appreciated, was often seen as secondary to the foundational skill of drawing a figure or scene perfectly.
So drawing came first.
You could say that. The ability to create a convincing form with just line was seen as a mark of true artistic mastery.
That's so interesting. And Dr. Portuguese over at Smart History makes this fascinating connection between Leighton's deep appreciation for pure visual form and the very beginnings of modernism. That's a bit of a surprising twist, isn't it?
It truly is.
You wouldn't necessarily think of such a traditional style pointing towards something so radical.
It's true. While Leighton was firmly rooted in representational art, his intense focus on the abstract qualities of form, the clean lines, the elegant shapes, the overall composition definitely hinted at the formal explorations that would come to completely define modernist art.
Even though he wasn't doing abstract art himself.
Not at all, no. But he was pushing the boundaries of form within a traditional framework, and that created a bridge, you could argue, to future artistic ideas.
The text also subtly nudges us to draw some comparisons between Leighton and Whistler's Symphony in White No. 1. What particular similarities did Dr. Portuguese point out when looking at these two very different artists?
She notes a shared interest in the beauty of the nude figure and a certain deliberate emphasis on formal arrangement within the composition.
Okay, so form and the nude.
Yes. However, the text also cleverly encourages you, the listener, to really think about the differences. Whistler's work, while also exploring color and form, often has this more suggestive, almost dreamlike quality, and it's far less overtly narrative than Leighton's meticulously detailed and story-driven scene.
Right, Whistler is much more about mood.
Exactly. It's a great exercise in visual analysis to compare their approaches to similar subjects.
Now let's talk about the setting of the Bath of Psyche. It's clearly got this classical vibe. What specific architectural features can we spot that give us that ancient feel? And how does Leighton actually use these elements within the painting's overall design?
We can clearly see those iconic classical columns and elegant marble steps, architectural elements you might vividly recall from our earlier discussions on classical architecture.
Yep, the columns definitely stand out.
And Leighton doesn't just include these for historical accuracy or a pretty backdrop. He strategically uses them to beautifully frame Psyche, drawing our eye directly to her and creating this powerful sense of grandeur and timelessness within the composition.
So they structure the image.
They really do. The architecture provides this strong, formal structure that perfectly complements the central figure. It's all about creating a harmonious and balanced visual experience.
And what about that serene pool of water? Obviously, it's there for Psyche's bath, but does it have any other clever visual or symbolic purposes within the painting?
Absolutely. It brilliantly creates a sense of depth and spatial recession, pulling our eye further into the scene. And of course, it provides that crucial reflection which is so central to Smart History's insightful analysis of the work.
The reflection, right?
It also acts as a really important compositional element, anchoring Psyche in the very center and creating a captivating visual point of interest that draws the whole composition together. The reflection adds another layer of visual complexity and intrigue.
The text also points out the presence of these white birds that look a lot like doves. Is there any symbolic meaning we should be aware of with these feathered friends?
Definitely. Doves are traditionally and strongly associated with Cupid, Psyche's lover in the myth, and also with Venus, the goddess of love and beauty.
Ah, Venus and Cupid.
So their gentle presence here likely foreshadows Cupid's imminent arrival and beautifully reinforces the painting's central themes of love, desire, and divine intervention. They add a subtle layer of narrative anticipation.
Leighton's overall color scheme in this work is often described as quite cool. What's the overall effect of these cooler tones on both Psyche herself and the surrounding setting?
The predominantly cool tones, those soft, pale blues, pristine whites, and subtle grays, really contribute to this wonderfully idealized and almost ethereally beautiful atmosphere.
Ethereal, yeah.
They enhance that marmoreal quality of Psyche's skin, making her seem almost like a sculpture come to life, and they create a sense of serene detachment and timelessness within the classical setting.
Are there any unexpected pops of warmer colors that we should be particularly looking out for? The text doesn't specifically highlight any contrasting warm colors in a significant way in this instance.
Not really prominent ones, no. The lack of strong contrasting warm colors further emphasizes this feeling of cool, classical purity. It maintains that very controlled, idealized mood.
Now, there's that dramatically hanging curtain in the background, and the text cleverly brings up the concept of the male gaze, as powerfully described by Laura Mulvey.
Ah, yes, the male gaze, a really important concept.
Psyche is positioned facing us, the viewer, yet she seems completely absorbed in her own reflection. What's the dynamic at play here? It feels a bit complicated.
It's a really fascinating and complex dynamic. Mulvey's groundbreaking idea of the male gaze suggests that women in art are often traditionally presented as passive objects for male viewing pleasure.
Right.
Here, while Psyche is undeniably presented frontally, her intense absorption in her own reflection could be interpreted as a subtle way of deflecting that direct, potentially objectifying gaze.
Oh, interesting. So she's looking, but not at us.
Exactly. It creates a sense of her own inner world and subjectivity, even as she is visually available to the viewer. She's both present and somehow withdrawn.
That ties in so well with John Berger's influential Ways of Seeing, where he discusses how women are often taught to internalize an image of themselves being constantly watched and evaluated.
A crucial point from Berger.
How might that profound idea apply to Leighton's portrayal of Psyche in this very private moment, both in a literal sense and on a more metaphorical level?
Well, literally, she is intensely focused on her own image in the water.
Clearly.
But metaphorically, Berger's idea strongly suggests that even in a seemingly private moment, a woman is often acutely aware of how she might be perceived. Psyche's intense preoccupation with her reflection could be powerfully seen through this lens,
Like she's checking herself.
almost as if she is preparing herself for the gaze of her absent lover, internalizing that societal expectation of being visually pleasing. You might find it incredibly insightful to revisit that particular episode of Ways of Seeing that delves into the portrayal of the female nude in Western art.
Good tip.
It really sheds light on these dynamics.
Finally, the text encourages us to go and find an image of the Bath of Psyche in its original frame. Why would Leighton have chosen an elaborate, ornate frame for such a painting, and what overall effect does that kind of framing typically have on how we perceive the artwork?
The frame. Often overlooked, but so important. An elaborate, often gilded, and highly ornate frame was incredibly typical for prestigious academic paintings of this era. It served several important purposes.
Like what?
Firstly, it dramatically enhanced the painting's sense of importance and value, immediately signaling it as a significant artwork. Serious bling factor.
Makes it look expensive.
Totally. Secondly, it effectively separated the painted world from its immediate surroundings, creating a clear boundary and drawing the viewer's focus entirely onto the scene depicted.
Creates a window.
Exactly. And thirdly, the ornamentation of the frame itself could sometimes subtly reinforce the painting's themes, historical context, or overall aesthetic. It was all part of creating a complete and impactful presentation.
Okay, we have covered so much ground.
And there are also those crucial 5-mark question topics to really sink your teeth into. The depiction of the female nude, the defining characteristics of Victorian academic style, and the specific ways in which Leighton depicts a mythological scene in this work.
Right.
The Bath of Psyche provides an absolutely perfect case study for exploring all of those in detail.
All right, let's bring this all together. So, Leighton's magnificent, The Bath of Psyche, the quintessential Victorian academic painting, hitting every single mark in terms of its dramatic mythological subject matter, that incredibly meticulously polished technique.
That memorial perfection.
Yes, and its undeniably prominent place within the established artistic hierarchy at the time, fiercely championed by both the influential French and British academies. It's like a perfect textbook example come to life.
Precisely. And truly understanding these seemingly traditional works isn't just about looking back at art history. It's absolutely fundamental for understanding all those avant-garde movements that burst onto the scene later and completely shook things up.
You need to know the rules to break them.
Exactly. Artists often consciously define their own work by either fully embracing or deliberately rejecting the established norms and conventions of their time. You can't truly appreciate the rebellion without understanding what was being rebelled against.
Here's a final thought-provoking question for you to really chew on. How do contemporary artists today engage with, or perhaps deliberately push back against, the long-standing traditions and conventions that were so firmly established by those powerful 19th century academies?
Good question.
Are there still surprising echoes of the academic in contemporary art, maybe in places we wouldn't immediately expect to find them? It's definitely something to ponder long after the exam is over.
Indeed. Keep those art history gears turning and always keep questioning.
And that brings our deep dive into the captivating world of Leighton's The Bath of Psyche to a close for today. Until our next art adventure on Art Kramer, keep those eyes wide open and those minds wonderfully curious.